Okay, this is my presentation on theory and film, interpretism paradigm for the movie The Whale. So for the topic I chose raising children in a diverse society, and I struggled with doing raising children in divorced and all of that stuff, but I really believe that the topic of this movie aids better to raising children in a diverse society because Ellie was raised in a world where her dad left, and the reason why he did that caused kind of a scandal. We find out very early in the film that there's a very heavy presence of a church called New Life in the town that they live in, and it's ingrained in all the lives of our main characters, including Charlie, Ellie, and the at-home nurse, who turns out to be Charlie's past partner's sister. So this church and its influence, combined with the circumstances on which Ellie's dad left and how she was actually kept from seeing him and all of that, showed that she had a very different upbringing from a lot of children. So the theories I've chosen are the family stress theory and the attachment theory. In the movie The Whale 2021, the family stress theory and the attachment theory of the Interpretism paradigm are both used to show the discord of a family after multiple crises. Through the trials in Ellie's life after her father left, and the trials in Charlie's life after the death of his partner, we can see examples of both theories showcased in an excellent display of a broken family unit pulled together by their trauma. For the family stress theory, I pulled from one of our class readings that I thought was really interesting and kind of dissected and said the family stress theory dissects the result of a family dynamic after a crisis event. Through the initial event of the crisis, the resources available at the time, and the family's perception of what the event is, there's a shift in dynamic. This theory pulls together what a family looks like and how it either evolves or devolves into its current state. So the quotes I was able to pull from the movie I referenced here. So in the first one we see there are other types of people like Charlie, for whom this amazing plan doesn't fit, in regards to the quote missionary trying to, save his soul while going through, this whole process. I feel like with Ellie's contribution to this kind of slide, the "Are you actually trying to parent me right now?" and "Stand up and walk over here," these are good examples of the family stress theory because it really shows just kind of how the roles switched. So trying to parent me right now because he was never around, because there was never really room for him to be a parent to Ellie, and she kind of had to take on that role herself, even though her mother was around. Mary was around, and she tried her best to raise her, and we see later that Mary really, thinks she's evil, thinks she's a monster. So they don't really mesh well, so Ellie kind of took it upon herself to raise herself and kind of take on this view of the world that was completely different than what it would have been if her dad had been there. After the crisis of her dad leaving and her not getting to know him, the roles completely switched and she was just kind of on her own. "Stand up and walk over here" is something she says to him in order to get him to kind of show her that he wants to know her and that he's willing to put in effort. And, that's another thing of role switching. The next quote, "I never knew you were doing this to yourself," is something that Mary says to Charlie, and Charlie then says, "You never asked how I was doing." And I really think that this kind of pulls at the separation component within the family systems. There was all this external and internal discord going on, and they completely disregarded each other. They separated the family unit completely. They didn't know anything about each other. There was a divorce and whatever. Charlie never knew that Ellie was in the spot that she was in, and Mary never knew that Charlie was in the spot that he was in. And that really, I feel like, shows the stress theory of just this crisis. Their perceptions of the crisis were completely different. And so just that not knowing what was going on with each other really showcased that for me. Like, the crisis, the perspective was so different. They took on the trauma so differently. And then to that last quote, "Is this why you kept her from me all this time? Because you thought I would think you were a bad mother," is something Charlie says to Mary. And that just shows another example of how the perception was a lot different. He didn't know that Mary was keeping his daughter from him because of that reason. He thought it was just out of spite. On to the attachment theory. The attachment theory refers to when a person seeks out comfort and security in times of crisis. There is a system activation that occurs and differs from person to person, and also differs based on the level of crisis. One may reach out to protect themselves and the people around them, while another will withdraw and hide to protect themselves and others. So the quotes I pulled along for this really have to do with those different kind of attachments. So with Charlie, he's reaching out any way he can to try and get attached to his daughter. In that first quote we see he is willing to pay her for her time, for whatever, because he knows she's dying. He seeks out comfort in that way because he knows that will bring her to him is the payment. He says regarding his past partner, "Someone close to me had passed away and it had an effect on me," and this just kind of shows how he reverted into himself, because he had no one to attach on to besides his partner's sister, who was kind of his at-home nurse, right? In the next quote, we see, another reason, another way that Charlie is reaching out to his daughter, again, in kind of a transactional thing. But then we have Ellie, who kind of goes through this whole thing of "you can't just throw me away," and then suddenly want to be my dad later. She has disengaged all attachment to him until the end, which is the last quote we have. Something I noticed a lot was when Mary and Charlie were sitting on the couch and Charlie was recalling the time on the beach they had when Ellie was little, and Mary just melted into him and she cried as she had that memory go through. And I saw that there was still a lot of comfort there, that even though there was trauma, even though there was whatever, there was still that connection and still that draw for attachment, because I feel like that's kind of the but the default. We default to our attachment values and we do all of that in terms of, emotional safety. And I feel like that's what Mary was doing there. She was really melting into her default comfort. And, we see that there is attachment. It just goes through that way. And then in the last quote before Ellie's kind of admission, I see Charlie looks out the window to see the plate where he left bird food was smashed, and I just kind of put in my own little tidbit here of, we can assume this is because Ellie's evil, as her mom says. I really believe this is her resentment of her dad taking care of something else and putting an effort to something else when he didn't put any effort into her. Then the very last thing that broke my heart at the end, he is crying out for her as he is dying, and she stops in the door and says, "Daddy, please." And we have never seen that kind of emotion from her in the rest of the film. And that is what I was kind of speaking on with Mary and Charlie recalling their time at the beach. It is a default attachment. And there's just, you're always going to revert back to it no matter what, once that, once that system is activated. So I thought that was a really good display of that. Another additional in regards to just a little extra thing as I was looking through some peer-reviewed articles is that there was a study I found based on children who were left behind by migrant workers. And I know this really isn't the same as the movie here, but I thought the overall consensus on what the children developed into were a lot similar to what we saw in Ellie. There's a lacking in some sympathetic areas and overall emotional health that I believe we see a lot of in regards to Ellie. She is a left kid, and I think even though this study details a different kind of left child, the similarities are definitely worth looking at. And that's it. Thank you so much.